During season 18 of the Woodsmith Shop, we built a casual style harvest table, it was called. You see the base here upside down. We showed the construction of it, but not the finishing portion, and that's what I want to take care of here. Now, because this is a more relaxed, informal style of table, we're going to go with a two-part finish. For the base, I'm going to use paint, and I have a latex paint here in kind of a grayish white sort of color. And then for the top, we'll apply a natural oil-based finish. I think this will play really well together. And then this color will wear the bumps and dings of everyday life around a family dining table just perfectly. So now I'm using a brush, kind of a medium width angled brush to be able to get into all the crevices and into the corners really easy. My main concern here is applying a thin coat that is really smooth, trying to minimize the brush marks as much as possible. What I want to do is work with the direction of the grain. So on the legs, it's a lot of long vertical strokes. When I get to the aprons and stretchers, it'll be horizontal strokes, making sure that I'm not puddling paint into different places where it can run and drip. I took care of painting all four of the legs. On a project like this, I find that it's better to kind of get into a groove where you can work on painting one particular component, in this case the legs first, because then you kind of get a rhythm going of tackling what the surfaces are going to be like, how the paint is reacting with each of those surfaces, and especially getting into these little grooves here, that bead detail on the legs. So what I'm going to do now is take care of the two end aprons that have the drawer opening here. And there's a few things you want to keep in mind. There's starting to be a lot of little inside corners where the apron meets the leg, and the bead molding, and even around the drawer opening here. And those are places that paint can start to puddle. So you don't want to load up your brush too much, and you want to go with kind of a light touch as you're working through here. So I'll take care of this one, the one on the far side, and then we'll wrap things up with the easy section of painting the long aprons. Well, what next? What I'm going to do before I walk away from the base of the table here is just give everything a once over. What I'm looking for are any drips or missed spots that I need to touch up again. And then I'm going to put my brush to soak in a jar of water just so that it stays fresh while I wait for the next coat. Now, technically with latex paint, you can recoat in a couple of hours. That's perfect if you're painting a wall. But for furniture, I like to let it set up at least overnight just to make sure that the paint has a nice solid bond here so that I can go over it with a second coat knowing that it's going to go down nice and smooth. And in the meantime, I'm going to get started on putting finish on the top of our table. There was a time when a dining table like this would have just been referred to as a table. It was a work table, the center of everyday life. You were just as likely to make your dinner at it as you were to eat at it. And it would also be the home for all kinds of daily household chores, from repair to homework, all that kind of stuff. Now it seems like a lot of dining tables have turned into altars for a once-a-year kind of special gathering. For me, though, I find that a table that is a little bit more quotidian, ready to wear the marks of age and use as badges, have a lot more meaning than those special occasion tables. So for that kind of table, you want a finish that can stand up to the everyday. So for this tabletop, we're using Old Masters tung oil finish. And what I like about it is that it's really easy to apply, and even more so, it's even easier to repair down the road. So what I'm going to do is just dispense some into a cup here to make it a little easier. You can see it's pretty thick. If you want to, you can thin it out with an appropriate solvent like a citrus solvent or maybe some mineral spirits. Kind of depends on the air quality region that you live in. Then I'm going to use foam brush or a series of foam brushes and start laying out a coat on here. And what I'm looking for is for that tung oil to absorb into this oak here. And it really will absorb. I don't want to have to wipe off a lot of it, so I'm just going to keep going back and forth over it until the wood pretty much isn't going to accept any more finish. After applying the oil and letting it sit for a few minutes, I went back over any places that looked especially dry, where the oil had really soaked in, and put a little bit more on. Then what I've done now is to wipe up all the excess. And I really don't want to have a ton of excess, like I said, it's just wasted product. So I've gone over and wiped it down, and this is the look that you want. It should look like it's a little damp or wet, but with no puddles or streaking. So if I move a cloth or my hand over the top of it, you won't see any streaks left over. Now this is a drying oil, and you don't want to leave the rags like I have left over here, or this one that I'm finishing up with, wadded up. The drying action can lead to spontaneous combustion. So instead what I want to do, and what you want to do anytime you're using an oil, is to lay them out flat, maybe on the floor or hanging over the edge of a garbage can, to allow that oil to fully dry. Once they're dry and the rags are hard, then you can toss them into the trash. Now the benefit of a finish like this is how it really brings out the warm amber and brown tones, especially in this oak. And you can see just how beautiful this piece is after all the gluing up and putting on the breadboard ends and everything. So we'll let this dry overnight, might take 2 days to fully dry, and then we'll come back and finish it off with a top coat of wax. Here's where we are now. I brought the two parts of it together. I put 2 coats of paint on the base. In between coats, I did sand it lightly with some 320 grit sandpaper just to smooth everything out. And I really like how the paint emphasizes the shapes on the legs that we made. And then after putting a second coat of tung oil on the top and letting that dry, I could bring them together so it's not taking up so much space here in the shop. The last thing that I want to do now is to finish the finish. And for that, I'm going to use some Old Masters paste wax here. I like the way that paste wax over the top of a finish just gives it a silky smooth surface, and also helps it, it makes it easier to clean up and wipe up at the end of a meal. So putting on wax like this is both similar and different from applying wax to your car. The key thing here is that you want to put on a very thin coat. So I'm using just a little piece of a woven, non-woven abrasive pad here. This is the white one, which has very little to no abrasive quality in it. But what I like about it is that I can just get a little bit of wax on here and then start rubbing it in. And the fibers of the pad are working the wax into all the small crevices of the wood while leaving a very thin coat. So you can't hardly even see it here when it's on, other than looking a little bit shiny. And that's the big lesson here, is that too often you want to really see where the wax is going, and that's a mistake, because once it hardens, it's going to be almost impossible to buff out well. So I'm just going to finish up this corner here, and then we'll let it dry. And that means all the solvent that's mixed in with the wax evaporates, and then the wax itself hardens. Now, depending on the environmental conditions, that can take anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours. So we'll come back and then I'll show you how to buff it out and then see the final look of this great looking table. With the solvent all evaporated out of the wax now, we can buff it out. One of the key things you want to do at this stage is to have plenty of cotton cloths here. They can be old t-shirts or whatever to buff it out, because you'll want to rub on a section for a little while and then flip it over to a new area on the cloth so that it doesn't load up with wax, and that it'll make the buffing process pretty easy. You do want to scrub pretty hard, and that's going to bring out the shine in the wax and give it a really nice soft feel all the way across the surface. So once you've done that across the entire tabletop, then this table is ready to take center stage for the everyday miracles that happen when people gather to eat. I want to give a special thank you to Old Masters for supplying the stains and finishes, and their support of the Woodsmith Shop TV show over the years, and for helping us to make great projects like this one.